I didn't watch enough movies last year. Not just anime movies, I mean in general. The only two I saw were Bullet Train and The Batman, the former of the two being the better one, by the way. But having not watched any anime movies from last year, apart from one which I'll get onto, I had to cut the Movie of the Year section for my annual anime awards, and I'm sure all 5 of you who watched that video were gutted. So I thought, bugger it, I haven't done a review in yonks, I might as well give you a nice old 3-in-1 today. Look at them chapters down below, and please ignore them because I know you're only here for Suzume, but I wrote 2 other sections, and I don't want my effort to go to waste. There'll be no plot spoilers for any of these films, and I won't be giving a score, but it won't necessarily be hard to tell what I think of these films. So the first film I want to talk about was the only one I actually watched in 2022. Bubble. Now, from an overview of the people who worked on Bubble, you can probably tell what prompted the development of it. It's from Wit Studio, the people who broke into the limelight with Attack on Titan. It also has the same director and composer as Attack on Titan, and wouldn't you know, the story also heavily features parkour, like, you know, Attack on Titan. But they added a new ingredient to the mix, as the scriptwriter for this was Gen Urobuchi, who's done some pretty prolific work. Put them together and what do you get? It's not even the best Netflix original anime movie with the word bubble in its title featuring a teenage main character who's noise sensitive and has to wear headphones. Let's just say it could have gone better. Bubble is unfortunately a case of the action being top tier, but nothing outside of those scenes making an impact. But not for lack of trying. The writers clearly made an attempt at having a story that goes beyond more than just the surface level, with clear allusions to The Little Mermaid and several visual metaphors baked into the film, but these motifs have some holes in them. The first of the main visual motifs are spirals, and while the whirlpools that litter the streets are an effective way of incorporating them into the world, the part where they explain the significance of the spiral pattern in understanding humanity's place in the universe had me going, hang on a minute. Gurren Lagann did this exact thing, and much better for that matter. The other motif are the titular bubbles, not only a metaphor for the expansion and contraction of the universe, but the bubbles themselves are also alien visitors from another dimension, and their collision with our world is what caused the dimensional anomalies. Yes, that is a sentence that left my mouth. Now, I love me my Lovecraftian gods, but here's the thing. Unless they're in an IV drip, bubbles aren't very threatening. So this film's attempt at making bubbles eldritch comes off more comical than anything else. Also, since the female lead is one of these bubble entities, it means that in this universe, the song I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles has a very different meaning. But even if these visual metaphors have been spot on, it feels like the writers couldn't match the grandiose themes with the more intimate story they were trying to tell between the main characters, Hibiki and Uta. Both of them have interesting moments, but it felt like the plot was guiding the relationship instead of vice versa at any given time. I feel both of these characters being on the quieter side was something that meant the dialogue writers could experiment with other ways of having them communicate. And while it was actually very interesting to see them do this, how they were saying things ultimately did not distract from the fact I had little interest in what they were saying. Uta's role in the story can be summed up in 11 words. Those words being
Fortnite balls, I'm gay, I like boys, I kidnap autistic kids.
And while Hibiki does at least show some signs of growth throughout the piece, it didn't feel like the plot centered around this growth, but instead centered around his ability to jump on things. Though speaking of the characters jumping on things, that was easily the best part of the movie. This is Wit producing an Attack on Titan parkour scene, but given a higher budget and more creative control, and they absolutely killed it. Say what you will about everything else in this film, this felt like where Wit Studios' influence was felt the most, and it paid off. And the music that accompanied it was also nice, but it could have been nicer. It was Hiroyuki Sawano doing the soundtrack, and while it's very good in the moment, it's not memorable even seconds after you hear it. Now, some have said this about every Sawano soundtrack, but that's quite untrue. The soundtracks for things like Promare, Recreators, and Attack on Titan were much more varied than people give them credit for, and they were still noticeable outside of the big action moments. Bubble's OST, however, is just a serviceable soundtrack, but it's from someone who's capable of much more. Despite all I've said, Bubble is a very ambitious project, and it deserves commendation for Wit's first attempt at an original feature film. This is a very talented studio, and I think given more time and a better concept, they will create something amazing in terms of feature films. This has unfortunately missed the mark. But on the bright side, Wit have been producing nothing but great shows on the series front, so I have no doubt they'll soon be following suit with their films. Drifting Home is one that fell under the radar, and I thought this was a shame. It's Studio Colorido, who are a bloody fantastic studio, and I consider Penguin Highway to be my favourite anime film of 2018. So it brings me no pleasure to say that Drifting Home is a miss in my books. As I was watching the film, I had the script to this video up, and was adding notes about the movie to it. Now, I could try and incorporate all these notes into the script, but I could just say this. Drifting Home feels like a team of writers came up with some themes, and then created some characters that effectively explored them. A separate team of writers then brainstormed a load of different ways they could match the characters in these themes. Then yet another team looked at the ideas generated by the previous team and decided to create a story that used literally every idea they came up with, including the ones that should have probably been cut. As a result, the film just feels bloated. Now, this isn't what was actually happening with the writing teams. Indeed, the director was one of the main writers as well. And if there's anything I can praise, it is the direction, since this is a person continuing their previous track record of expressive characters, inventive use of camera angles, and visually imaginative scenery. However, the plot feels more like a collection of too many threads that don't know how to interact with each other. Characters will start arguing in one scene, that scene will end, another scene will start up, a different argument will break out, and then the next scene will be about the unsolved argument from 2 scenes ago. It means things are constantly being restated, and it feels like the plot is not moving forward, but instead just looping back around on itself. Now, the themes are tangible, and at points even interestingly put across, but I feel this could have been done the same, if not better, if half an hour and several characters were cut from the movie. It also doesn't help that these characters never feel like they go in consistent directions either. Now, I can understand why they occasionally do something stupid. These are primary schoolers, for goodness sake. On top of this, some of their initial stubbornness kind of needs to be there for us to see their growth, and it is explained with their backstories. But that being said, it feels like they sometimes just go back on decisions and realizations they made in literally the previous scene for no reason whatsoever. The central two have an arc that goes in nicely with the themes, and I was at least invested in them, but it feels like they too are held hostage by the constant restating this film has to do. This film has some very good ideas behind it, and occasionally these ideas are executed well when left to the animation and the acting. At its peak, it's a reflection on moving on and the idea of home told from this unique youthful perspective, but at its worst, it reads like a parody of a Mari Okada drama, and that's when this film starts to drag. And that's not even mentioning how abrupt some of the scene placements are. It feels like some moments are just cut off randomly with no explanation. Some of you may remember that during my early days on YouTube, comparing things to Your Name was the closest thing I had to a personality trait, and all these years later, I can see it was a bit foolish, as while Your Name is still comfortably my favourite movie of all time, I can understand that I can go into a Shinkai movie without trying to compare apples to oranges. Okay, that's a lie. I was expecting to watch Suzume, and just like his last movie, Weathering with You, love it while still recognizing it bears a lot of similarities to Your Name, and hoping that Shinkai would change things up for whatever he's cooking in 2025. And oh ye of little faith, because as I'm writing this, even 2 months after watching it, I have indigestion from the amount of humble pie I need to eat. Yep, my prayers to the Church of Shinkai can continue now that I've seen Suzume. It is undoubtedly a Shinkai movie, but there was no point where I felt what I was watching was by the numbers. There are moments that definitely didn't work, especially in the third act of the movie, but even at those moments I was still enthralled. While there's undoubtedly similar themes to Your Name and Weathering with You, Suzume feels like the new approach I was hoping it would be, and it goes through to every aspect. A lot of people have been arguing over the central dynamic between Suzume and Sota, and while I personally like it, I can understand why others wouldn't. But even if you don't ship it, the relationship isn't the main focus like the respective romances in Shinkai's other films, because this puts the focus solely on Suzume herself and her journey, and she absolutely shines as a character. As do all the other human characters, by the way. The cat's kind of useless, but admittedly they're not in the film for that long, so that's all well and good. This feels the most action-packed of all of Shinkai's movies, and Comics Wave films definitely rose to the challenge. Frequently they find new ways of moving the camera around the scene in a way that makes the sequences feel even tighter than they already are. There are some 360 shots in there that made me audibly gasp, and all of these quote-unquote action scenes work very nicely, even if the setups to some of them could risk being a bit too much like a Marvel third act, given the amount of red smoke everywhere. And the music they have to go along with it is extra impressive. Your Name has my favourite soundtrack to anything ever, and Weathering with You's OST also went hard, but even with all that bias, I could tell that the way the music was used in those two was very similar. As a result, I was worried when I saw that Radwimps were back doing the soundtrack for Suzume, as I feared it was going to be yet another good yet formulaic soundtrack. but my god was I surprised when there were barely any vocal tracks implemented into the film itself, and instead we had a mix of chanting, electronics, and full orchestration, and okay, allow me to explain. You know how there are those memes about people's disorganized playlists where it shows a different clip for each song? Well, this soundtrack is one where you could get a full video of that out of just one fucking track. And when coupled with the direction, the effect is just tantalizing, as sequences like the one directly preceding the title card were so well choreographed that I'm pretty sure I was meant to applaud, and I was very close to doing so. But with Shinkai being Shinkai, there's more than enough moments that slow things down, and a lot of reflections on the central theme of disaster are very poignant, especially in a post-Fukushima world. Now, I will say not all of them are integral to the plots. Indeed, some of this comes in a third act that is already kind of confused about how long it's meant to be, but the more chances are given for Comics Away films to let the visuals do the talking is always appreciated. And I'm really glad it wasn't just confined to Tokyo this time, and we got to see more of the Japanese coastline, beautifully realised as always by Comics Away films. Now, this film does have its problems. As I mentioned, they become most apparent in the third act. If anyone's seen the film, you know what I'm getting at. It feels like the break into this act happens at 5 different points, and it's moments like these where I get the impression that several drafts of this movie were placed on top of each other. But I will say it results in a really satisfying climax for the piece, which, just like all the other Shinkai films I've seen, has one standout moment where every element of the film, from the directing to the animation to the voice acting to the music to the characters to the themes, come together to give you half a minute of some of the best shit you have ever seen. Yes, I wish I could come up with better words for it as well. This is absolutely the film that could eclipse Your Name. Do I prefer Suzume to Kimi no Na wa? No, because that film holds a special place in my heart, and that's a hole that can only be filled once. But Suzume is absolute proof that Shinkai is still capable of blowing your mind with his films, and I would not blame you if you preferred this to Your Name. In conclusion, Suzume is comfortably the best anime film of 2022, and I'm going to write it into my Anime of the Year spreadsheet that no one else but me can see. There is no higher honor I can bestow upon a film.